Hi Justina, here is the feedback on the mock exam that you did just before Christmas. So looking at question 1, you got the full 4 marks for this question, so that's a very good start. And if we move on to look at question 2 now, where you are asked to write a summary of the differences between Eddie and Henry. You've made a good start. You start off saying there are some similarities between them, but there's quite a few differences as well. And you've mentioned the fact that Eddie lives with his father while Henry's at boarding school and doesn't like it. And then we've got quote here where you've said Henry isn't doing well with academic achievements. And your quote is, when they left home they could both spell. In Henry's letter I see several words wrongly spelt. Whereas Eddie usually receives scores over 80% on his tests. I think there it would have been better had you put the actual quote in where it mentions that he's got 20 out of 25 on 80%, so you need to include quotes for both of them. You've also discussed the difference between the relations with their fathers. Like you've said that Eddie and Henry both seem to have a strong bond with them. Henry's very respectful, which you could also add shows fear. He could be a little bit afraid of his dad because he's so stern, whereas Eddie treats his father like a friend that he can make fun of. Again, you needed to have included the quotes for both of those points there. So if we look at the mark scheme, if we look at level 2, it says show some interpretation from one or both texts. Well, you've considered both texts. Some inferences, yeah, there are some inferences, but I would have preferred there to have been a little bit more in more detail. So you've said they both have strong bonds with their respective parents, and up here you've used some inferences about what you've implied from the comments that are made in the text. You've selected some appropriate references and textual details, but again you need to include more. You need to include a quote for every point that you make, and if you're considering 2 different sides, you need to include quotes for each one, so you need to include quotes for Eddie and for Henry as well, and statements to show some differences between the texts. So again, you've met that criteria. But if we look at level 3, it says makes clear inferences from both texts and select clear references, textual detail relevant to the focus of the question. So I think we are limited to the level 2 here. So I think it's 4 out of the possible 8 marks, which is not a bad score. So well done. Moving on to question 3, where you're asked to analyse the language that Henry uses to try to influence his father. The comments that you've made and the quotes that you have used are all good quotes and good points. However, your score is going to be limited to level 1 because unfortunately you've not mentioned any subject terminology, so similes, adverbs and so on, which is a great shame because you would have scored quite highly for this question had you done so. If we look at the mark scheme in level 1, this last bullet point here says make simple use of subject terminology, not always appropriately. And then for level 2 it says make some use of subject terminology, mainly appropriately. So the fact that you've not used any is going to limit your score to a level 1. Had you used some terminology, then we would definitely have been in level 2 because you have attempted to comment on the effect of the language and you have used some quotes. So you say that he's afraid of Mr. Smith and that's his father, not to mention anything in your letters. Here you said he would flog me if he knew it. So you could have said he's used the verb flog there to make out how badly he's treated by the teachers at school. You've said he goes on to describe the bad conditions he's being kept into, wants his father to empathise with him, and you give the good quote there. So again, if you just said he uses emotive language or hyperbole, that would have been a good point. And again, here we've got the simile, more like bears than Christians. You go on to say he describes the bad quality of the living standards. The bread is nearly black, the adverb nearly. and the fact that it's the worst barley meal. The adjectives again paints this picture of how horrific it is to live there. And then again, the emotive language, or the you could say hyperbole as well. He'd rather be obliged to work all his lifetime than remain at the school for another year. And again, you've summed it up saying he created a sad picture of his life at boarding school. Makes it clear he's very unhappy and wants his father to get him out of the nightmare. So all in all, what you've written is very good. It's just lacking, unfortunately, the subject terminology. So because of that, it's got to be limited to 2 out of possible 12 marks. But like I say, had you just included some of that terminology, which I know you do know, and that's the frustrating thing, you would have been, I would think, scoring in the level 3. So bear that in mind next time. Moving on to question 4, where you're asked to compare how the 2 writers convey their different attitudes to parenting and education. First of all, you did identify that you were to use the second letter in source B and not the first letter, which unfortunately not everybody did, so well done for that one. You've made some good points about the differences and their attitudes. So William doesn't believe Henry. You've given a quote, boys will sometimes complain without cause. So he's very suspicious and asks the family friend to see George because he believes his story is more reliable than Henry. He doubts that Henry's being treated as badly as he's making out. So it's good points there. Yeah, again, you've picked up on the fact that they don't particularly have warm feelings about school. Jay's experiences of school, and you've given some good quotes of the words that he uses there. Sunday night feelings of dread, humiliation, pay attention now, chilly emptiness. And William states straight out that he doesn't approve of the system of education because the spelling seems to have gone backwards. So again, that's another good point. You've picked up on they both seem to be committed to the boys' lives. Jay's trying to put himself in Eddie's shoes by trying to do his homework and struggles with it. And although William, as you said, doubts Henry, he makes an effort to find out if it's true and whether he should be brought home or whether he's kind of over-exaggerating it. So looking at the mark scheme at level 2, it says the first bullet point is attempts to compare ideas and perspectives. Well, yes, you've definitely done that. Make some comment on how writers' methods are used. I think you've done this a little bit, which puts it into level 2 as opposed to level 1. However, I think you would need to do a little bit more to get up to the level 3. You could have mentioned the fact that Jay uses humour when describing his feelings when Eddie's mocking him or humiliating him, and the use of rhetorical questions, whereas Henry writes very proper, formal language, even though he's writing to a family friend about the situation. So that would have put you into the band 3. Select some appropriate textual details and references. You've done that, and they do support the text that you've used, and identify some different ideas and perspectives. Well, again, you've done that one. So let's just have a little look at level 3. In fact, yes, I think we can go up to level 3 because I would say that you need to do this a little bit more. And I've already said about explaining clearly how the writer's methods are used in greater detail. But your quotes are relevant and you've shown a clear understanding of the different ideas and perspectives. So I think where it says at the bottom of the level 3, a student will have level 2 and at least one of the skills descriptors. So I think we can say that's 9 out of the possible 16 marks for this question. So that's good. That gives you an overall score of 19 out of 40, which, considering this is the first time that we've looked at a mock exam for this paper too, and the fact that you were missing for some of the lessons before Christmas, that's a very good score. And as I've already said, had you just included some of the subject terminology in question 3, you would have been in the 20s for that, so that's really good. So you're doing really well. There's everything still to play for. We've got 5 months now to continue building on your skills, but I don't have any doubts that you should be able to achieve a good mark in your GCSE English. So keep up the good work. Make sure you attend all the sessions. If you're unable to attend any, try and catch up on the work before the next lesson, because the work does tend to follow on. And make sure you do all your homeworks. But as I said, you're doing really well. I'm very pleased, so well done.